In this video, we're cooking Montreal smoked meat and comparing it to Texas style brisket. Which one is better, and how does my Montreal smoked meat recipe compare to the real thing? We're gonna find out in this video. Let's get smoking. Now, Montreal smoked meat is a type of delicious cured and smoked brisket that originates from Montreal, Canada. And you might think it's just pastrami, but there's actually a few key differences. First, it's always dry brined and aged as opposed to pastrami, which is often, but not always, wet brined. Second, it has slightly different spices than pastrami. And third, and most importantly, it comes from Montreal, it's steeped in tradition, and it just has that je ne sais quoi. After it's done, Montreal smoked meat is sliced very thinly and it's piled high on rye bread in a sandwich, and it's served with some yellow mustard. Texas style brisket, on the other hand, is not brined or cured. It is smoked fresh. It's sliced into 1/4-inch slices and it's served as is. Sometimes it's served with pickles, raw onions, white bread, some other types of sides, but it's often eaten alone just after it's sliced with no other condiments or any other side. Now, the main ingredient in both dishes is brisket, but the way they're prepared is very different and the end result is very different. So let's jump into how each of them are prepared. Starting with the Montreal smoked meat brisket, get a 12 to 15 pound full packers cut brisket, or it's also called a whole brisket. You want both the point muscle and the flat muscle attached. These briskets will often come with a ton of fat on them, so make sure to trim that fat cap down to a 1/4-inch thickness and remove the hard seams of fat on both sides of the brisket. And the final step is to remove that translucent silver skin from the bottom. That stuff won't render and it prohibits a lot of the spices and the salt and the smoke from getting to the meat. Now, the second step is to dry brine the brisket, and this is going to take 10 days. The first thing you're going to do is apply the Prague Powder curing salts. This curing salt is comprised of sodium nitrite. Don't be confused with Prague Powder number 2, which is sodium nitrate. You want this Prague Powder number 1, or pink curing salt. I've left a link in the description section below to calculate exactly how much curing salt you need for a brisket based on how heavy it is. And it's very important to get the ratio correct because you don't want a bunch of extra nitrites in your brisket. It is a carcinogen, even though it's used in everything from bacon to sausage, and it's even found naturally in things like celery. But just make sure you're playing it safe and you get the exact right ratio. I like to calculate it carefully using a scale. It came out to about 17.4 grams of Prague powder that I needed, or 2.5 teaspoons, and that's for my 15.4 pound brisket here after trimming. And I like to apply the Prague powder separately from all the other spices so I know that it's evenly coated. So I sprinkle it all over both sides of the brisket, and once it's completely gone, then I move on to applying my kosher salt. I'm also very careful in applying my kosher salt because I want the right salinity. I want the right saltiness at the end of the whole process when the Montreal smoked meat is cooked. So I'm using roughly 9.07 grams of kosher salt per pound, so roughly half a cup when I multiply it by 15.4 pounds. And again, use that calculator in the description section below to calculate how much kosher salt you need. And then I add into my cup the rest of the ingredients for the dry rub. You don't have to be as careful with the measuring of these spices because they're not going to penetrate very far into the meat. It's just going to flavor the surface. 4 tablespoons of whole black pepper, 2 tablespoons of white pepper, 1 tablespoon of whole mustard seed, 1 tablespoon of whole coriander seed, 1 tablespoon of red pepper flakes, 1 tablespoon of garlic powder, a tablespoon of dill seed, a tablespoon of celery seed, and a tablespoon of bay leaves. Then you're going to grind all of these ingredients up for a few seconds. Just pulse them until you get a really coarse grind. Realistically, it's going to be a mix of coarse and fine grind, but that's really okay. If you want to get an exact coarse grind, then you can use a mortar and pestle, but that's really not necessary. Now place the brisket in the fridge and flip it over every day for 10 days in a row, and make sure to do it with a bit of style. After 10 days, remove the brisket from the fridge and rinse it off thoroughly. So we're rinsing off all of that dry rub from the brisket. We're gonna dump out that water, and then we're going to fully submerge the brisket in water and let it soak for 4 hours. And we're gonna change the water every 30 minutes. This is to desalinate the brisket and make sure that when we smoke it and serve it up, it is not super salty. After that, pat the brisket dry, and the next step is to apply the rub. And for the rub on the Montreal smoked meat brisket, you're really just using the rub that I mentioned before in the dry rub, except we're not adding any sodium nitrate, so we're not adding the Prague powder, and we're not adding any salt. It's already got enough salt inside of the brisket from that dry brine for 10 days. And I'm not adding any bay leaves because they tend to not go very well on the palate, and they can cut your mouth if you're not careful. So I left that out of the rub recipe. If you guys want to take a look at the rub recipe for the exact recipe, I've left it in the description section below. I'm using a little bit of mustard here, so I just slather it onto the brisket. It's acting as a binder, so when I apply the rub, it just has something to stick to. Now let's go over to prepping the Texas style brisket, and this is a lot easier. All you have to do is trim it exactly like I just showed with trimming the other brisket, slather it in mustard, lay down some salt and pepper, 50-50 kosher salt and coarse grained pepper, and that's it. That is a lot easier to do than the Montreal smoked meat recipe. It takes about 15 minutes as opposed to 10 days. All right, now let's get these briskets onto the smoker. After smoking the Montreal smoked meat brisket for approximately 9 hours at 225 degrees Fahrenheit on my offset smoker, it reached an internal temperature of 165 degrees internal, and I pulled it off the smoker. Now, Montreal smoked meat is steamed after it's smoked, which is kind of hard to do at home, but my solution to the problem is an aluminum pan with deep sides. I put some canning jar lids on the bottom, and then I put a barbecue grate on top of those to provide a little bit of standoff distance from the bottom of the aluminum pan. Then I filled the bottom with just enough water so that it was still below the grate. And then I placed the brisket into my makeshift steaming apparatus and covered the top tightly with foil after putting my probe into the thickest part of the brisket, and I placed it into the oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. Now back to the Texas style brisket. It was ready to wrap at around 170 degrees internal. The bark was where I want it. It was nice and dark, so I removed it from the smoker. I wrapped it in tallow-soaked butcher paper, and I placed it in another aluminum pan. I used my meter remote probe for this brisket because it sends the temperature directly to my phone so I can monitor it, and these things are really awesome. If you guys want to pick one up, there's a link in the description section below. Highly recommend the meter probes. And then it went in the same oven as the Montreal smoked meat brisket at 275 degrees Fahrenheit. And I just had to wait for both of the briskets to finish. After 2 hours, the Montreal smoked meat brisket was at 203 degrees internal. So I removed it from the oven and I took off the aluminum foil to let it vent for about 15 minutes to stop the cooking process and prevent it from overcooking. And after 15 minutes, I removed the grate from the bottom of the aluminum pan. I removed the canning jar lids, and I just placed the brisket in with its own juices, where I let it sit to rest for another 2 hours. Just to soak up some of those juices and rehydrate until it came down to around 140 degrees internal. And now back to the Texas style brisket. It reached an internal temp of around 203 degrees Fahrenheit. That's usually where I finish my briskets. So I did my finishing checks, decided it was done, and I rested it on the counter for 2 hours. Now let's do some slicing.
This is Good Morning America.
Good morning, smoke trails.
Good morning, smoke trails.
All right, guys, smoked meat. I have a confession to make. I've never had smoked meat before, Montreal smoked meat.
Oh.
I've been to Montreal, but I've never had that traditional delicacy. So My understanding is that you, Mo,
Yes.
have had Montreal smoked meat before in Montreal.
Yes.
And Viv, have you had Montreal smoked
Yes.
meat? Okay, this is good because now I'm going to have some people that have actually tried real, legitimate Montreal smoked meat in Montreal. So why don't you guys give it a taste and let me know what you think?
Absolutely.
I'm going to dig in as well.
Yes. Bon appetit. Man.
Yum.
First impressions?
This is incredible.
It's really good.
It's incredible. And I've had smoked meat a lot, and this is probably definitely up there. It's like incredible. It tastes exactly like you would think it would taste. If you're in Montreal, this is what you would get. Man, and it's juicy, the spice, I don't know.
Yeah,
You nailed it. For somebody who has no idea what this tastes like,
Yeah, some guy-
you have no idea how well you've gotten it.
Just some guy in Alberta.
This is incredible. Yeah, this is like a taste of home.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear. Can you say it in French?
Oh, ça goûte incroyable. Ça goûte incroyable. Vraiment.
Yeah.
Thank you. Merci.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Wow.
So you've been to would you say you
I've been to Schwartz's.
Mhm.
I've been to Dunn's. I've been to Reuben's.
Oh.
And I can say, hands down, none of them taste as fresh as this one does. They taste great. I'm not going to say they don't taste great.
Yeah.
Because they really do, but none of them taste as fresh as this. The color, the seasoning, and I'm not a connoisseur, but wow.
That's good.
Yeah.
There you go, guys. So you'll know if you follow this recipe, then you'll be getting pretty close. If you can't get exactly 100% of the way there, because you're never going to have Montreal smoked meat unless you go to Montreal, which you need to do. But this will get you pretty damn close. I do have a surprise for you guys as well, because I know that you guys haven't tried my Texas style brisket before. So I made a Texas style brisket, which I'm gonna slice up for you guys, and I want you to compare it to what you just had here. Okay guys, we got the Texas style brisket here that we're gonna compare to the Montreal smoked meat. So Mo, Viv, why don't you guys give it a taste?
Okay.
Let me know what you think.
Oh my god. So good. It's so different. It's so different. Feels like the Montreal, this one feels like it has more flavor to it, but the Montreal one feels like it's more moist. Like it's not as, it's maybe more tender. I don't know if that makes sense.
Or the brine, maybe, I don't know.
That makes a brine?
Yeah, could be. Could be that because it was brined longer, it could be holding more moisture.
It feels like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's what it is, because this one feels, it tastes incredible, but it doesn't have as much, like it doesn't fall apart as easily, I find.
Right. Well, the Montreal smoked meat was steamed, and this one was finished in butcher's paper in the oven, so it like lets a little bit of that steam out, right?
Yeah, so maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, because you want to preserve the bark. You don't want to steam it too much to dissolve the bark. But the bark is what I love the most about Texas style brisket.
I mean, this is really good.
Yeah, they're both really good.
But I still think that maybe it's because I just love Montreal smoked meat. So I'm very partial. It's hard
Yeah.
to say this is better, but because I think my heart will always belong to the Montreal smoked meat. But this is incredible. And it's a nice comparison, because not often would you have meats that are so different at the same time to compare it right away.
Yeah.
So this was really nice. Thank you.
Cool. Well, thank
Very
you guys.
nice. Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now it's not over, guys, because I have one more surprise for you. I felt kind of bad that I haven't tried actual authentic Montreal smoked meat from Montreal before. So luckily I found a place online where I could order Montreal smoked meat directly from Schwartz's Deli in Montreal, which is like the OG original place that Montreal smoked meat is served. One of the most famous, one of the most best places to get Montreal smoked meat. I got it in the mail today, and I just boiled it in a pot for 10 minutes to warm it up. I put it on some rye bread with some mustard, and it is looking good. I'll tell you something, guys. When I opened up that package, the cryovac package, it hit me with some sort of, it just had this awesome, savory, smoky scent that I've never experienced before. It's something awesome. I don't quite know what it is, but I'm interested to take a bite of it. So let's dig into this. Oh man, that's unreal. That was really good. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna take a bite of this just to slice by itself. What is that flavor? Oh. Oh. Oh man. God damn, that's good. Oh my God. Oh my. Okay. Okay, sorry guys. I basically ignored the camera because this was so good that I just had to say, you know what? I'm not gonna film this. I'm just going to enjoy the eating experience. That was really good. This is a bucket list thing. If you guys have a chance to go to Schwartz's Deli in Montreal, you gotta go because this is amazing. It's one of the better briskets I've ever had, and it was shipped to me from Montreal to all the way to Calgary, Alberta. So here's my tasting notes. Why is it so good? The bark is really good along the outside. There's a really nice spice mixture, but I don't think that's what makes it really shine. It's so well cured. The meat is very sweet, it's well cured, and there's some magic going on inside of that meat that I couldn't really put my finger on. I just sat there thinking and eating it, and then I finally figured it out. It's that taste you get from really well dry cured German sausages, the ones that aren't really cooked. They're dry cured or dry smoked. The fat in those sausages, those cured sausages, it creates this this kind of like umami, savory flavor experience, and that's what I was getting with this. So I don't know what Schwartz's Deli is doing with this meat. If they're dry aging it or something before they actually start smoking it. Maybe they just dry brine it for a really, really long time. More than I did with mine. But it has amazing flavor. I can't even describe it. It's really good. As you guys can see, I'm really excited about this. So, how does it compare, most importantly, to the brisket that I did, the Montreal smoked meat recipe from this video? I think it's very different. First of all, it's just a different flavor. It's got that dried cured sausage fat type flavor. The bark and the spices are more subdued. It's not as big as a forward punch. Big reason for that is because it's more thinly sliced. You'll notice that this is a lot thinner. It's more like bacon than the Montreal smoked meat that I made in this recipe. And also, there's one other thing. This isn't as cooked, as well done, or overcooked as the one that I did. I took my brisket all the way up to 203 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was all jiggly. This one, it probably came up to, they probably finish it at, I'd say that's like 180, probably. They take it off at 180. They definitely don't go all the way to 190, 200, and then take it all the way so that it's fall apart. And that helps them, I think, slice it so thin. And because it's so thin, you can get more layers, you can get more flavor per square inch. So it's just a different flavor experience. I like the one that I did in this video. It's really good, but it's more briskety. It's more like a briskety version of Montreal smoked meat. This is like legit smoked meat. It's bacony, it's aged, it's cured, it's sweet, it's savory, it's got the rub flavors, it's thinly sliced. There's a lot going on with this thing. Those are my tasting notes for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you're encouraged to try to make your own Montreal smoked meat at home, and let me know how that goes if you try it out. And if you guys are interested in chatting to me more about my experience and the recipe that I created in this video, consider subscribing to my Patreon channel. I'll link it in the description section below. You can go check that out. We're building a really cool little barbecue community where we're all committed to getting better at barbecue. I'm gonna make this Montreal smoked meat recipe again when my folks come into town. They're really excited about it, but you know, does it compare to Schwartz's Deli actual Montreal smoked meat? I think you actually have to go to Montreal in order to experience that. Happy smoking, guys.